Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Call-Out Policy. Years ago, I worked in the energy industry. My location was manned by a single person, working 10-hour days, with 8 days on and 6 days off. In the off hours, automation kept things running. So if there was a problem at the location, I was required to drop what I was doing and either log in to fix some issues or drive the 50 miles out to the facility to fix the problem. Company policy stated that if there was a call, regardless if it warranted a response to drive out or if we could handle it remotely through our computer, we got paid for a minimum of 2 hours at time and a half. After a particularly rough shift with lots of nights spent on location, I went on a much needed set of days off. On my first day off, my counterpart on the other shift called with questions about the problems I had. I answered and went about resting. The next day, I decided to take a break and go off-grid for the day. When I returned, I had a number of calls from my boss. When I called him back, he reprimanded me and told me that I was an on-call employee, so I need to answer when called. Annoyed, I just said okay, but asked him to follow that up with an email, which he did. We talked more about the problems for about 10 minutes and hung up. That evening, my counterpart called 3 more times, and we talked through some ideas for fixing it. Over the next 4 days I had off, he, my boss, and others working on the issue called many times. Now, remember when my boss said I was an on-call employee and was required to answer? I added each call to my timesheet. At the end of my 6 days off, I had made just as many hours as I would in my 8-day shift. At the end of the pay period, I was called into the office, where he and the district manager demanded that I explain the excessive callouts. I provided the email sent to me by my boss as well as the company policy for calls. They said that was a pretty wide interpretation of both. I countered and said that I had been called, and I answered as required by my boss's email, so per policy I was entitled to call-out pay. They disagreed and called in the vice president and HR, who surprisingly agreed with me. I was paid out for the time, and the rule became that you were only to call off-duty employees in dire emergencies. I was never called on my days off again. The next story is called No Overtime. This took place in the 1990s. A T1, 1.5 megabytes per second data connection would run you over $500 a month. And only the phone company and a few very large data-centric companies would even dream of having a T3, 33 megabytes per second. I was working for one of those telephone companies in the central office, where we provisioned and troubleshoot those very lucrative services. There were 4 people in my department, making it one of the larger such offices in the state. One day there was one person on vacation and another one out of the office for some other reason, and tech number 3 called in sick. I was alone for 8 hours with the workload of 4 technicians. Well, as a good employee, I prioritized and got all the trouble tickets done and all of the most urgent new services installed. Everything due that day was done. But in the process, I missed my 2 15-minute breaks and worked through lunch. My supervisor came down at the end of the day to congratulate me for my good work, and he was watching me fill out my timesheet for 9 hours. He started to get a little panicky and said he couldn't approve overtime. He would get in trouble. I reminded him that I had just spent 9 hours doing the work of 4 people, but he said it wasn't approved. I said, what can we do then? I worked it, I need to get paid. He suggested I leave an hour early on Friday, so I agreed. Come Friday, I decided to take full advantage and only take a half-hour lunch so I could leave at 3:30 instead of 4. Well, guess what? The vacationer and the sick person had not returned, so it was just 2 of us. The other person disappeared at 1:30 or so. I found out later she was interviewing for a management position. At 3, I got paged for a ticket on one of those very expensive T3s down hard. I was to join a conference bridge to assist in troubleshooting. I joined the call, then at 3:25 I said, sorry, I have to drop off. I'm not approved for any overtime. The night shift person will be here in a half hour to help. I dropped off, knowing the night person on duty had never worked on a T3 before. I hadn't even reached my car when the pager started blowing up. Overtime is approved, please stay on. But I had already clocked out, so I just smiled and got into my car. Drove home and took my wife out for a long overdue date night. The third story is called Motivation. I was running engineering projects for our client, and their workers were very lifestyle focused. But this meant they often refused necessary meetings as they saw them as an inconvenience. I escalated this to their management and got shrugged off and told to sort it out myself. Informal chat over a coffee later, and I found that they had a crazy car mileage reimbursement policy that the unions had slipped in that was 3 times over what was normal. They could make a significant amount of money while driving on company time, but rarely if ever had a reason to. The solution to my problem? I found a remote site 50 miles away down a highway, and the client team attended every meeting after that. They made more from traveling to the meeting than they did from their salary on those days, all at management expense. Management now had a widespread problem of everyone using this technique. They had to spend far more time and energy stopping people from attending meetings they didn't need to be at, compared to if they had just fixed the original attendance problem. The last story is called Balance is Everything. I used to be a game master in another life, and I worked in the very first escape rooms of our town. I had 2 employers, one of them an accountant, and they were pretty much, hey, let's not care about workers' right. Our employees are young, they won't realize or protest. Thing is, I had learned a thing or two about laws thanks to my master's degree, and I'm French, so complaining is kind of a sport to me. I quickly became their nemesis, letting them and my coworkers of course know whenever they try to ask us something illegal. They used to ask us to check in earlier than our official starting hour, 15 minutes earlier precisely, just in case we had clients, or to prepare the room for them if our first time slot was taken. So we used to leave 15 minutes earlier when we had nothing left to do, as a way to balance things. They noticed that and asked us quite formally to please note on our presence tables whenever we left earlier. So we said yeah, sure, and we started noting the times we left earlier. But life is all about balance. So I started to also note the times I got in earlier, and convinced my 2 coworkers to do the same. At the end of the week, we easily had 1 or 2 hours more on our timetables than what we normally had to do. Of course, our employers tried to talk us out of doing this, to which we innocently replied we thought they wanted us to give an accurate image of our working time. Wasn't that the goal? In the end, they told us it was not necessary to check in early anymore if our first time slot was not taken. A small loss for salary, a big win for pettiness. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories in today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and would like to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.